So just while we set up then the next session, I think that is a clear indication. We're really trying to found this whole approach of the day and the work that follows from it in the meeting of the client requirements here. This isn't about trade in an abstract. This isn't about digitalisation in abstract. This is about meeting the requirements of those major global institutions like Barclays, like Puma, who are going to use this stuff, who are going to invest in digital systems and are going to benefit from their implementation. So having established that there is a problem, that there is a potential for solutions, let's go and look more clearly at that corporate perspective on the business case for digitalisation. We've got a distinguished panel once again, which will be introduced by and moderated by Natalie. She is, who's our commercial director at ICC United Kingdom. So over to you, Natalie.
I was told not to touch, and hopefully is this mic working? Can everyone hear me? Perfect. So I was told not to touch the red mic, which I haven't, obviously nicked. So if our panel would like to make their way to the stage, just getting mic'd up. So I feel very, very lucky actually to have such a great panel. This time last year, we were organising this conference and it was quite tricky to find some corporates that were able and willing to talk about what they've done. This year has been a bit of a different story. So I think that's just testament to what we've achieved as an industry and how fast this is actually going. So welcome to the stage. I've got Nick Reeks, Director of IT at Tata Still, Grant Hunter, who is Director of Standards Innovation and Research at BIMCO, Miles Rothbury, Group Treasurer from Boohoo, Marcus from TraxPay, thank you Marcus, and then Sue Ashworth, who is from Matalan. So we have three great corporate speakers, one industry association that's made some pretty big commitments on digital trade and has been helping lead the way in metals and mining, and then also a global service tech provider. So without further ado, I think the last session was quite clear. There's issues around paper, but now this session is all about the business case. What are companies actually doing? I think it's important to be positive and to look at what the things that you can do opposed to the things that you can't do. And I'm hoping my next three speakers from the corporate side can really demonstrate what they've done, why they've done it, and to what business benefits. So just going back to what was raised on the previous panel around show me the money, show me the numbers. You know, what business benefit have you been able to bring to your organization? And I think I'll start with Boohoo, with Miles, if I can. What did you do and why did you do it?
Good morning, Natalie. Oh yeah, good. Microphone's working, that's for sure. Yeah, good morning, everyone. So my background before I go any further I was always a banker. So between, first 16 to 20 years of my career, I was at Barclays and then HSBC in corporate investment banking. Boohoo was a former client of mine between 2015 and 19, and that's where I got to know the co-founders, Mahmood and Carol, and the CEO, John, very, very well. And then I ended up moving to Boohoo when they tapped me on the shoulder and said, look, we're going on a growth journey. Can you help us out a bit? So I came over and joined as a group treasurer. And, my jacket buttons up over a number of areas, not just the capital stack and the financing, but also, risk management, non-stop procurement, and various other strategic projects. And I also got given then the curse as well as the gift that is payments and the payments team. And what was really clear was that Boohoo hadn't really moved on from 30 years ago when it used to be a wholesaler. And it was massively paper-based. I'd go as far as to say Dickensian in a lot of the ways of working. But equally, that was also driven by the supply chain. We've got to oversee supply chain in 22 countries, lots of different conventions, different types of paperwork, how they operate and what they do. And it was clear if we were going to move away from that, we just needed a different approach. And I'd seen that, 16 plus years in banking with clients, actually, that whole trade cycle process, the PO and order right through to payment, was a problem. And the big problem is linking together trade documentation with financing. No bank solved it, no fintech solved it that I found at the time. So well, let's go out to market and see what we were doing. So we've got 6 supportive banks, one of whom is Barclays, Jaya. You guys are a big lender to us and very supportive. We appreciate that. But actually, having gone through the market, there was only one platform that actually did what we wanted to do. And it was actually a small startup in the UK. The co-founders here, Tim Nicol, you should all go and speak to him. They're Prima Trade. And as I say, 16 years in international banking, it's the only platform I've seen who can do this. We needed to automate that PO to pay cycle. So I went up to Mahmood and Carol and John, and, you know, we talked about how to get it on the C-suite agenda. C-suites are concerned with growth, being the best and getting paid. They're all incentivized with equity and LTIPs. So actually, what's the benefit of doing that? And it's marrying all that documentation that we used to get into Boohoo manually with financing, and then us taking a skim. Okay, so that's really important. That's how you get it on the C-suite agenda. And actually, what does that do? It means that we remove all the documentation requirement that's manual. We push that onto the supplier. They put this upload in the system, use OCR technology. We've got all the scan paperwork across the trade cycle and compliance, you know, certificates of origin, that kind of stuff. It's all there. Nice PDF format using Prima's technology. Never had that before. And that's going to help us in the future access more capital, equity and debt. And equally, that just means that suppliers can get the money quicker. Our suppliers are concerned with sales and cash flow. That's what they're concerned about when you break it all down. And actually, they want to do more trade and make it easier and frictionless. But let's put the friction on them if there is any, not on us. So we did that. And actually, we've realized loads of working cap benefits, cash, obviously reduce our interest cost, but also makes us easier to do business with, and people want to do more with us. So the upshot is that, you know, we're in a space now where, you know, within a couple of weeks of agreeing an initial pilot with Tim and the team, we'd proved it in Bangladesh, hardest country by a country mile to do trade with. And actually, if it works there, it can work anywhere. And then actually post-Christmas, in the beginning of 2023, within 10 to 12 weeks, we'd put on, you know, our whole international supplier base onto Prima and had visibility across our trade cycle, which we'd never had before. And actually started then unlocking loads of automation benefits. We've had 40% reduction in people costs, just because the jobs were redundant. There was no need for them. Equally, we've had probably additional working cap benefit of, you know, upwards of, you know, 30, 40 million quid, and we're making a skim. That's the key thing. So we've got financiers in the background, they get paid, we make a skim on top. The suppliers know exactly what's going on, they're comfortable with it, and, you know, we're able to move on and do things like that. So for us, it's about doing more of that and articulating those benefits to suppliers, being a supportive customer, and going from there.
So I hope we're writing some of these statistics down, because I think that says a lot in terms of the business case. What were the kind of challenges and that you faced, and how did you get your supply chain on board with the sort of the new technology and the changes that they would need to make as well internally?
Challenges were mindset of people internally in Boohoo. They've been doing the same things for 30 years. The suppliers were actually crying out for this stuff, just that no one ever asked them. The other thing was getting on the IT agenda and actually getting up the roadmap, because that is a bottleneck in every organisation. Again, the approach that we took with Prima was great, because although we're now doing a lot of integration with them to make sure we've got the best possible processes involved, we didn't need to do that to get going with Prima. And actually that proved the case for people internally. The final big challenge was actually the banks. So actually, again, given my background, I know what banks want in terms of AML and KYC. It's the biggest issue when funding any supply chain. And that's why whenever you put supply chain finance programs in place, banks will throw out the numbers around the value that they finance, but they're not made to serve the SME market, because there's just, you know, too much financial crime opportunity, and the documentation is onerous. We were getting it anyway in order to onboard our suppliers, and we just added a few layers in conjunction with Prima and our finance partners, and said, well, actually, if we ask for this, that's globally going to be at a standard that is going to be acceptable to 90+% of banks, and it's going to make us safer. Let's do that. And then that's meant we've been able to unlock finance partners coming in. So for us, it's marrying, again, for the supplier, what do they care about? Sales and cash flow, trade documentation, consistent format, nice and easy in one system. They can then get the finance off the back of it, because they warrant that data to us.
Okay, so I'm just conscious we've got a few people who probably share some of these experiences, and no other than maybe Sue from Matalan, being a fellow retailer. Sue, can you tell us a bit about your journey and what you've done and why? I know it's maybe some different reasons, and some of which quite practical actually, which you shared with us on the speaker coordination call. If you could just tell us a bit about yourself and what you've done at Matalan.
So obviously I do trade finance, so mine's more surrounding documentary collections, so prom notes, bills of lading, COOs. So we've worked in collaboration with the Nigeo and Lloyds Bank to get a collection using our digital prom notes, using the common law promissory notes, so there was no international banks involved. So, sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. So within the Nigeo, they uploaded a draft promissory note. So all I had to do, instead of typing one up, couriering it to the bank, was review it online and submit it with a signature digitally. So that saved 2 days with couriering for the documents to be released. So that in turn releases the bills of lading in time so we can get the containers released to port.
And one of the really practical things that you shared with us was just around, and this will tie in as well with Nick from Tata, was the timing of why and when you went digital. Can you tell us a bit about that?
It was during COVID, because obviously, Bruna said it before, all the documents were getting sent to my house. So obviously, you know how many documents I think about 500,000 documents go through my hands each year. And overall, there's 28 million documents in trade worldwide. So that was the dining room took up. So that's when I started thinking, surely there's got to be another way. So I found the ICC, and I seen that the Documents Trade Act was coming into effect in 2 years' time. So I reached out to Lloyds, and they put me through to the innovation team, which they've been superb with what's been happening. So we were doing some pilots and trying to onboard suppliers for us. So before the guarantee come to effect, we completed our paperless guarantee. So that turned around within 1 day, whereas normally we're waiting 5 days for the supplier to reach it. So there's just huge range of benefits, getting documents quicker, and obviously when we move on to EBLs as well.
So just to bring Nick into this now. So Nick at Tata, tell us a bit about what you've done and why.
Thanks very much. Glad to be here this morning. There's a couple of people talked about Barclays this morning, so I can remember one of my student jobs was was working with Barclays in the international trade branch, and actually they gave us experience at handling letters of credit, and they were actually driven by how many mistakes they could find, not how many papers they could progress. So it's good to see that times are changing, I guess. Some of our focus obviously is on the physical trade movements, and the emphasis that we've got in our company right now is shifting. We're moving from a blast furnace operation to electric arc, and the interim phase we have to import material to process. And what that's doing is a kind of a trigger event for us. Is opening up a huge amount of challenge as to what's the transparency and what's the where are materials and where are they at. It's interesting what you were saying earlier, Miles, about your kind of motivation. So one of our things that doesn't motivate us is taking a skim kind of thing. So it's like we're trying to understand the origin of material and then what we're going to do with it, how we process it, and then where we sell it, and then what our customers are going to do with the technical information. So it's a slightly different driver set in that area. Over the last few years, we've spent quite a lot of time and energy on automation and digitalisation. In India, they've just completed working with the authorities and the port authorities in particular, a customs portal. So all of our information which we require to export from India is now automated and goes through a digital capability. And on top of that, all letters of credit information is entirely automatic and through RPA facilitation as well. So that's made a huge difference to the ability to export from India, which is important to us in the short term because we'll be relying on some of that material to process in the UK. Within the UK operations and in our European operations, we have quite a strong track record on EDI over the years, with tens of thousands of transactions already highly automated and using self-billing capabilities with vendors, but also the same in reverse then with our customers. And that's gone really well. The other area that we're finding in terms of automation is the technical test certificates that we've got for our material. A couple of years ago, and this is driven partly by COVID, but the other key trigger was Brexit and post-Brexit trading requirements and the need to have more and more data about our products and our invoices, etc. We've pushed hard on a B2B e-commerce capability for our customers, and we've probably over the last 2 years had a 12-fold increase in the access to test certificates online. Again, when I started in the steel industry, that literally was a test certificate that came as a piece of paper and was collected, and then it was actually quite difficult to track it back to the material. Gradually, that kind of moved to PDFs and emails and requests, and now it's through the online portal, and that's a couple of thousand lookups every week to check for customers to check their data. So we've been pretty active in this area, but there is so much more to do, so much more to do.
So this kind of brings me on nicely, I think, to BIMCO actually and grants. We need more industry collaboration. We need lessons learned, and which is why we also, as the ICC, set up the digitalisation, the corporate task force, so that people like those on the panel today can come together, share experiences and learn from others. And BIMCO, you recently had done something within the metals and mining industry. Can you, Grant, tell us a bit more about that, what it's done, what it's achieved, and to what extent it's sort of what's next on the agenda?
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, we've been very conscious in the shipping industry. We lie at the very heart of international trade. Something like 80% of the world's goods are transported by ship. In fact, probably almost everything I'm wearing today came in a container from Asia. You know, it lies at the very, very heart of the way we move goods around the world. And how we deal with the issue of paper is a real challenge for the industry. Like all other industries, we want to become more efficient, but we ourselves are just part of the process. And therefore, for us, collaboration with all the stakeholders to drive efficiency is absolutely essential. What we've experienced in the shipping industry when it comes to moving over to electronic bills of lading and digitalizing other trade documents, which the people involved in shipping are handling, we have to work together. Absolutely, collaboration is important. And to encourage people to move over to this, we need to share good news stories. We need to find those who have successfully adopted and implemented electronic bills of lading and other similar measures and get that message out to the industry. Because it's far too easy for people involved in shipping to sit back a little bit and say, well, I'll just wait for the perfect solution from whatever company that comes from, whatever digital solution it may be. For them, many shipping companies are small to medium-sized enterprises. They're very reluctant to invest in new technology, which they don't know that may even exist 2 years from now. What direction will all this technology take? There's lots of choices. It all involves cost. There's a reluctance there. So what we've done as an organization is collaborate with some of the world's largest mining companies, a program where they committed upfront that they will transport by sea 25% of their annual trade volume in iron ore by 2025. Because we want to show to the world, this is big numbers, 25% on electronic bills of lading. It's not all trade sectors. It's not going to work for everyone, but it's a very positive message that you can get this to work, and you can get it to work using existing technology within the existing legal frameworks as well. And that's an important message. Lots of stuff that's been talked about this morning is happening, legislative change, lots of new developments in technology. They're great, and they will simply make this process much easier and faster, more efficient in the future. But what we want to demonstrate, certainly to the shipping industry, is you can get on board now, and you should get on board now. 1 year into our 25 by 25 campaign, we're already very close to reaching that 25% target amongst those 4 mining companies, which is Vale, BHP, Rio Tinto, and Anglo American. I think that is a tremendous achievement. And it's that sort of good news story which I think will encourage other companies and corporates to take these steps and make a real effort into going digital.
Thanks. So as part of, obviously, this is happening. We've got the legal infrastructure coming into place. By 2026, we're going to have the legal framework to enable digital trade transactions to take place. And so I think the message that we also have from the ICC is that it's just picking out the pain points in your business, those flows that are maybe inundated with paper, a bit like Sue's situation where her front room was taken up with paper. Identify those pain points and really just take it bit by bit. But industry collaboration, I think, is so vital and so important, as well as government collaboration as well, which is why we're working with government as well around the table to make sure that all stakeholders are involved in this. The last stakeholder, I guess, I want to come to as well is not last but not least, but is Marcus. I mean, what are you seeing from the service provider sort of community, the tech provider community? How are you working with your clients around the world? What are they doing? How are they prioritizing their time? That's one of the biggest things that we've heard recently is how and why should corporates prioritize this? As a corporate treasurer, as a supply chain manager, you've got so many priorities that you have to face on a day-to-day basis. Why should they prioritize digital trade?
Well, Natalie, I think the key difference from the past when it comes to the duties of corporate treasurers is that they don't only limit themselves to transform working capital into cash. They now have to see that the physical supply chain and the financial supply chain come really together. The point is, we have so far 3 layers in value creation. We have this transport layer where you physically move goods. You have the paperwork layer, and you have the finance layer. And now with the DNIs, you can merge all that. People might say, why does this take so long? I would like to reply to these people. Please remember the words of Lord Holmes. He said, the ETDA is one of the most important acts you never heard of. This never heard of, and this, why is it so important, has to be understood. We have now such a huge opportunity to solve so many challenges that you first have to develop a certain strategy. And when I remember the last major initiative was the bank payment obligation, it took such a long time to work, and then it didn't work really well because it was dependent on banks predominantly. This is bad news. The good news is nowadays we have, with so many tech and finance providers, many more opportunities to cope with these challenges corporate treasurers want to resolve.
And so today I'm conscious that probably in this room we have one of our main constituencies of our membership is the corporates, the law firms and the bankers and the trade finance providers. What's your message to those that are in our membership? How can they be helping to facilitate and speed up maybe implementation within the corporates? What could they be doing? So it took, Sue got in touch with her bank and said, hey, what can we do around this? And I didn't actually realize that Sue had seen a post from ICC online that made her do that. It was just very advantageous, I think, for this panel. But what would you say, how can people be a bit more proactive in the industry?
Well, I think, first of all, we have all to be careful not to contract with the German DCs, which is everything has to be perfect from the very beginning. Yeah, I may say this, I'm a German. Yeah, so if I may quote what Nick told me earlier, he said, I'm here now 20 minutes, and I've learned already so much that there are so many solutions out there, so many solution providers out there I've never heard of. So I think this is a perfect example for the necessity of an organization like the ICC. The ICC can coordinate that, can group the respective solution providers and make people talk to each other. One final comment on this. It is not only an issue of what solutions are out there. There are also, there's also the issue of what instruments can be utilized. We have heard about digital bills of lading, warehouse receipts, but we have never heard about the digital negotiable finance instruments, such as bills of exchange, promissory notes. If you speak about these instruments, you have to be aware that they have been forgotten for more than 40 years. So there are a number of especially young people who have never heard about bill of exchange. So you first have to educate them, and once they understand what enormous power such an instrument that combines finance, payment, and enforcement capabilities, then they understand what they can do with it. So you really have to make people talk to each other, you have to educate people, and then you have to group the solutions.
So just building on that, actually, I wouldn't mind if we just sort of ask the panel. You talk about, we've noticed, and certainly yesterday in yesterday's session, we had Abacore, who are a provider of sustainable sugar products. There seems to be a need for trailblazers. So individuals that are gonna make this happen within their organizations. And I'd like to think all of you represent as being trailblazers. You talk about skills internally and what's the need of, you know, the industry having the skills to be able to adopt some of this change. From the perspective of the corporates, where was this a challenge for you internally? Whilst you had the intention of trying to make this change, were there the skills there, and what help do you need maybe from industry around developing the skills?
Honestly, I mean, do you see what Marcus said? I mean, this is what we've been doing for the last 15 months. So marrying that physical supply chain, documentation and financing, you know, we spoke to our suppliers. What do you need? What do you want? And, you know, I had some of that experience from banking as well, and say, well, we just want one place where we can go to, put everything on and get our cash quickly. Sounds simple, but, and it kind of is. So actually, you know, this is what we were looking for from our perspective as a business, to say, if we can do that, simplify ourselves massively, automation, understand our trade cycle, and make money doing it. I can't emphasize this enough. And what I'd say is, you know, having heard what the panel have said, which has been fascinating, and what you, in your intro as well, Natalie, but also in that first opening point, the electronic digital act for everything that's going on around trade is, you know, it's really interesting and it's really important, particularly for commodities trade. But actually, wasn't there that stat about SMEs being 90% plus of the businesses by volume who are doing that trade? And I think it's about 2/3 by value. This isn't going to affect them that much in the next 10 years. Actually, you talk about the progress. The progress for us is digitization through getting them to PDF their documents. Put it in our system, data scrape the lot, take all that data off, nice and clean, put it into our environment. We've digitized. But we've done that with an SME in Vietnam, or, you know, a mid-corporate in the UK, or, you know, a big corporate in Morocco. And we've done it that way. And you talk about progress. It's not perfect, but I tell you what, it's working well for us. And it's working well for our suppliers. So I'd say just there isn't really a barrier other than to get going. And, you know, internally, everyone doesn't need to know all the detail. Right? You know, for me, if I'm being blunt, you go up to the C-suite. This is just me being a bit direct potentially here. I know everyone might not do this, but you go knock on the phone, give one of the guys a ring. Well, I've got an idea. I've written it up. I want to come talk to you about it. These senior people make decisions very quickly. They don't need a 1,000-page deck and board paper. Give them a call. What's on their agenda? What's important to them? Put it in their language. And I tell you what, you'll have your money within a few days. Then right, go and execute, and then it's on you. And if you don't execute, you can get fired. and if you do, great. But actually, that for me, that's this go-to action point. And actually, that was one of the things that we benefited from. We had a partner that was able to do that quickly with us because they got it. So look, we don't want a years long IT project here. Let's just get on with it. Suppliers will benefit. We'll see the results quickly, and we'll start making some money.
Yeah, I was gonna say, Nick, how do you feel about a year-long project?
Just because having spent the last 12 years as an IT director, bottlenecking roadmaps and cancelling projects or taking far too long, obviously taking far too long.
Yeah.
So,
Gotta move on now.
the one genuine observation I'd have is that if you think about who are the loudest people around the table when it's come to what kind of IT projects are we going to do and what can we digitize, it's kind of sales, and sales. Okay, we've got to talk to the customer. We've got to have a CRM. We've got to have an e-commerce platform. We need your entry capability.
That's the language they talk.
Yeah, exactly.
So where are we going to make money?
That resonates closely with the kind of leadership team, and so you bring that forward. It does take, and we all have it, but it takes a trigger event of some kind to promote this concept. It's either existential threat or it's a kind of major change in your business model or something else, usually financially related.
I made there. I'll tell you what my trigger event was. Come down and walk through this payments team and the trade documentation team and tell me that this isn't something out of the 19th century.
Yeah.
Walk around. Read boxes up here.
You've simplified it just by transferring to PDFs.
Honestly.
What about all your prom notes, your bills of exchange,
Yeah,
documentary collections?
So we typically ask customers, sorry, not customers, suppliers, but we provide the PO and they have to match their invoice, which they upload digitally, bill of exchange, packing list, certificate of origin, whatever it is we want to put on. It's up to us, and they have to match it. If they don't match it, it doesn't go through, and they don't get paid. It's really simple. So guess what? They match it. And we've got nice, clean data.
So how have you got electronic bills of lading from Bangladesh? Because with their banking regulations, banking me heads against a brick wall.
Oh yeah, it's a pig. I'll pick up with you afterwards. Yeah. But the thing is, you just make them upload it. It's there.
Because that's what we're finding the issues with.
Yeah.
Obviously, shippers having different platforms, banks having different platforms.
That's why you can't
They're
rely
not
on them.
talking to each other.
That's why you can't rely on them. Get it yourself, put it in a nice clean set of data, and just give it to them in a package.
I'm sure
they can't say no.
would be happy with that.
They can't say no. They can't say no. It's all there.
Marcus, do you have anything to?
It's all there.
No, it's I think it's basically quite simple.
It is.
You just have to be willing to accept it.
It's not. We still get handwritten invoices on this upload. I'm not joking. You've just got a data scrape it.
Grant, you look like you're poised.
Yeah, I am. The shipping industry is very, very traditional, and I can hear all about this digitalisation sorts all your problems out, but it's people that kind of lie at the heart of all this, and how we change their mindset. And I think part of the issue is we've almost got to persuade people that paper is not good anymore. I mean, paper bills are laying around for hundreds and hundreds of years. Everyone accepts them in the industry. We've found all the ways around how do we get to use them, but we've now got to persuade people that there are risks associated with bits of paper. And that's part of the challenge that we face in the shipping industry, because all too often a paper bill of lading will never arrive at the discharge port. And this exposes the ship to commercial risk and to legal risks of misdelivery. And quite often what happens, we've developed this system, you accept a letter of indemnity, which is not really worth the paper it's written on anyway. But we have these issues with paper, and somehow we've got to persuade people that the system that did work before is no longer the system that works. We've got to say that paper, you're highly exposed to risks of fraud, and it's a simply grossly inefficient system because the bits of paper never arrive. You can't say that unless you can offer a viable solution that people are happy to buy into. And we're kind of getting to that stage, but it's taking a lot to persuade people that we're ready to make that step. And I think certainly when it comes to small to medium-sized enterprises, it's a big, big challenge. They don't have the resources to think all this stuff through, and it's the people are the big, big problem.
But they can upload a PDF, which is part of the way towards digitization, which is where I've gotten to.
Some people. Yeah, I mean, so obviously we've been importing iron ore from the companies that you're working with for many years and continue to do so in the Netherlands. And you're talking about shipments that arrive about maybe 125,000 tons, possibly no more than 2 products on the vessel. So the amount of paperwork is actually pretty limited, but it's crucial. And you're talking about ships traveling from North America, Brazil, the Arctic, or even Australia, etc., South Africa, coming into Europe. So, you know, the shipping time is long and the paper should arrive, but, you know, the paper then needs to actually find its way to the quayside at Port Talbot, for example. That doesn't even have an office. So doing it all electronically is good. The only thing, and I've not understood more from the ICC itself, and I'm sure maybe I think you might pick this up this afternoon, perhaps it is good to make everything digital, but we cannot, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say, we've got to understand the risks around digital fraud and the risks around cybersecurity. Yeah, every platform, if we work with a platform, we're going to need to understand its level of security, its level of integrity, and how the data flows. Because the PDF stuff is all very good. And in fact, that's actually very, very well locked down these days. But if you get an email from someone and it's just slightly spoofed, because, you know, we see this quite frequently, it does put you into risk in the supply chain. So it's just something else. It can easily happen on paper, far more easily, usually, but it happens more quickly on a computer. So that whole cyber risk is also there for us as well. Okay.
Marcus,
Can I just add an example that I've seen in this sort of transition between paper and the digital world? We've heard of an example where a ship owner accepted an electronic bill of lading. When they got to the discharge port, everything fine. The electronic bill of lading was there, it's ready to give an exchange of the cargo, but they also asked for a letter of indemnity, which was the whole purpose of using the digital bill of lading. You didn't have to have a letter of indemnity. So we've got this mixture of the two worlds. So yeah, there's still some way to go to have that trust built up in these systems.
Well, I used to bank out of infrastructure businesses like Manchester Airport Group, Manchester Stansted, looking at overseas M&A, Peel Ports, ABP. You know, absolutely, they've got the infrastructure, but it is a cultural thing. At what point are they going to make that change? And we just found with our supplier base specifically that actually the leap to electronic trading was actually one where they were much more comfortable doing uploads of existing paperwork, letting them do the work. We get the benefit, they get the benefit, and actually it's a step of progress, to your point, rather than trying to make the leap. It's just, let's get going. It works. And actually, you know, so far we've done over $300 million worth of trade with our international supply chain in 12 months, all on that system, over 100 shipments a day, say 22 countries. We ship into the UK, Europe, and in the US direct, dealing with all the customs paperwork and everything else. So it can be done.
So just conscious of time, and I really want to open up for questions from the audience. So I think we've got a couple of mics available. Does anyone have any questions for our panel at all?
Thank you. Miles, if I heard you correctly, you mentioned about how sort of reticent banks are to lend to SMEs because they're perceived as a higher fraud risk. Two questions. One is, what are those perceptions the banks have that they think the SMEs are that increased risk? And the second one is, if some of your SME suppliers could get better access to finance, is that in your interest?
One of the things I've seen in my career, and you'll be familiar with it, like the valley of death in terms of financing. You know, you've got, you know, startup, you know, and that, you know, right through to scale up and through to, you know, being larger businesses. And that kind of debt and equity access really starts drying up in that SME space. And that's where the rise of the alternative lenders have come in. You see a lot of the PE funds and everything else filling a lot of that gap. I've got a lot of sympathy with the banks because of the regulation. Having been a banker, again, at Barclays and at HSBC, two big global trade banks, it is all around that anti-money laundering sanctions work that needs to be done to identify, you know, individuals and have all the right paperwork in the right countries. And it's all slightly different in those countries because each of those countries are regulated by their own authority. So it's all messy. So, you know, for us, we work with, with Prima and our other funding partners and said, look, what are the ingredients that every bank will need when they give somebody money? And it's these 10 documents, right? So regardless of what country you're in, even if they're in a different format, we'll ask for them. So actually that then does a huge amount of the work for the banks up front. Because one of the things is if you separate physical goods, documentation, and the finance, to your point before, suppliers having to do it in 3 different places. We do it once, put that all in a nice package, give it to the financier up front so we know it's going to get through the screening. yeah? And then actually we've taken all that work off the financier. So actually they can go up to their compliance committees and go tick, 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 tick. Right, there's 400 suppliers. Let's go. I doubt whether there's a program in the country that has 400 suppliers on supply chain finance. Just didn't happen. So actually this is something that we've tried to unlock with our partners to then say you get access to the SMEs. And then actually what does that do? It creates economic growth, and it has that bigger, wider agenda that the ICC has around creating jobs, lifting people out of poverty and all those things. But you can do it just by very simply having a comprehensive tick list of the stuff they need. And when we ever start working with a supplier and we do the annual check to say, have we got everything from you? You just update it, get all the docs there. It's in a nice, clear bank format. Not for every bank's different, but for most of them, and you can get it done. And then as far as the financing goes, yeah, well, if banks can get comfortable with that, then it all comes down to the credit risk. And that's something I have to do on a case-by-case basis, but ultimately we sit behind our program. So the banks are comfortable with us. There's the backstop. They're comfortable with the giving it to the SMEs. So that's where bigger corporates, people like Tata, far, far bigger beasts than us, can actually massively help that supply chain.
Thank you.
Hopefully that answers the question.
We've got one more question down the front, please. If you'd just like to say who you are and your company, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm a banker, so there's a lot being said. I work for HSBC. Now, my question is, and it's all music to our ears, and I quite like what Marcus said, actually, that people seem to have forgotten the ways of financing around bills of exchange. It's quite a useful practice. Do you see some of our financing practices moving back to traditional ways on leverage, and how much of it have you sized? Because there are various techniques on how you can monetize some of this. Do you see traditional trade financing coming back in a way, or is that something that's too much to say?
My personal view as an ex-banker as well, supply chain finance.
There's a lot of recovery people
Supply
here.
chain finance is very much based on purchasing receivables, non-negotiable instruments. So it has nothing to do with payment in the first place. If you understand that the bill of exchange is a payment instrument, I really do not understand why you have to apply these rigid KYC requirements if you just pay. Your risk is the one who has issued the prom note. And what you are doing is you are remitting funds to the supplier. You do not do any KYC when you remit funds, yeah? Non-documentary payments. There is no KYC. You do an AML check, you do a sanction check, but you do not do a very complex KYC process. And this is what has been forgotten. And this is why it should go back to traditional trade finance, using more the old techniques that have been forgotten.
It was a couple of years ago, I don't know if people may not follow. Can anybody remember there was a story about ghost ships coming from the USA to the UK at that time for scrap? Yeah. The company that was involved with that was trying to sell that scrap to us. I was in a number of sessions with them. Before IT, I was in procurement. And to your point, the company that kind of put the concept on the table in front of us was entirely driven by finance. And they said, like, if this will happen and this has happened and this is how we're going to get paid and this is what you're doing with the fight. So we're driven by the finance piece. And then we said, okay, but what if we don't get the scrap? That impacts our production. They said, oh, well, we'll give you a credit. And we're like, yeah, but if we're not making steel, then that's the end of the glass. You know, it's the end of the operation. If we don't keep going, we stop. So I recognize your question. Yeah, maybe we will, but I think just sometimes from the people who are on the platforms and they're pitching into us and others probably, you have to understand what's the core driver for us as a customer. Finance will be important. It never isn't. But fundamentally, you've got to make sure that doesn't trump our primary reason for being. That's all.
Just conscious of time, we did start a little bit late, but I think we can have one more question just down the front. Thank you. Before Nick kicks us off, I think.
Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Julian with Stability. This one's for Nick. I just want one because I did hear you bring up a question about security, and I know we're talking about the security of like of basically a document. And so if we think about those documents from the perspective of a digital document can be maybe more easily made less secure, how are we thinking about security in terms of those documents? Like, what are some of the solutions, I should say?
I'm not sure I would want to comment on solutions because I'm not in that space. But I mean, I think the questions that we'll be asking is, you know, where is the data? Where's the data held? What's the data sovereignty? What are the security measures that are being taken, etc.? What cloud service are you with? Are you with a cloud service, etc.? So it'll be more about so we'll be screening in the same way that people are screening suppliers for sustainability and all the rest of it. I don't think, having said what I said earlier, I don't think we should be saying, okay, we can't do digitalization because of a security risk. I think it's just, you know, it is one of the things you need to do as you shift from the old way to the new way.
We've actually got our sponsors, Arcit and Draxbay, obviously, Trade Secure rather can help with that. But yeah, they're certainly looking at the security side of things.
In the ETDA, there is clearly written that it has to be a reliable system, and it's up to the market to evaluate this. The respective security providers are happy to share their security systems, and from all what I can say, they are quite robust.
Yeah, and don't forget, probably 90% plus of cyber incidents. It's not a 16-year-old in a hoodie in a room, right? It's somebody sending out what looks like a reasonable email saying, you know, oops, forgot to ask you this. Could you just do that? Right? That's the biggest risk by far.
Okay, so just getting the eyeballs from Nick over there to finish off. Just wanted to say a big thank you to our panelists. We do have a corporate roundtable session later on in the day where I think we're going to go a little bit more in depth into some of these things. If there are any corporates that want to be part of that session, come and see me. Thank you ever so much. Put your hands together for our panel.
Thank you.